This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, perfect. All right, so if you see my eyes kind of going everywhere, it's because I'm switching from a bunch of screens. So bear with. This is clearly my first time doing a Zoom workshop. Okay, so today I'm doing a collaborative workshop on community fridges. I'm the workshop coordinator with the Loaded Ladle, and this is my first workshop in this position. I'll be doing a lot more workshops in the coming months, and they're all advertised on our Instagram, and they're always free. I've just noticed that they tend to fill up pretty quickly, so that might be something to be mindful of. Before we get started, and also if people can ever not hear me or can't see the slides or anything, just let me know in the chat box and I will do my best to fix that as fast as possible. All right, so just to get started, I recognize that my workshop was imagined and facilitated on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Knowledge, food insecurity, which my projects, servings, and workshops seek to help or educate on, are felt particularly amongst Indigenous peoples. The overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples amongst food insecure individuals is inherently linked to colonization. And then another little word before we get started. This is just a disclaimer to mention that all the information that I'm sharing today is sourced from my personal experience starting a community fridge, along with my experience in community work, mainly in Halifax. I also have used Dean Spade's book called Mutual Aid to add to this workshop, since a lot of his work and knowledge is what based a lot of the foundations for the community fridge. This information is based off of lived experience, stories, mistakes, etc., and is not to be taken academically. This workshop is informal, so I just want to make sure that if folks are taking notes or quoting or anything, this is not like an academic presentation. This is just kind of to share information in community. All right. All right, so the agenda for today. So I'm just going to start off with an introduction of myself, who I am and why I'm doing this. And then I'll continue with explaining what is a community fridge, how to start a community fridge in Halifax specifically. I feel like a lot of the information will be really useful to other places in Canada. I don't really know if it would transfer internationally. It's the same concepts, but I mean, from bylaws and policies, I don't think that that would probably be the same. And then I'll touch a bit on what mutual aid and community care is and how it relates to the community fridge. And then I'll have just a bit of a little information piece on the importance of comfort food when donating to a community fridge and how it can make a huge difference. All right. So the introduction for me. My name is Rina, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm a white, queer, disabled settler living in Mi'kmaq. I've been living here for about 6 years now. Through my work in the community, I've built a passion and greater understanding for community care, for abolition, especially anti-police, and harm reduction. I strive to advocate for disability rights in all aspects of the community. I have a social work degree that I'm not quite sure if I'm ever going to use, or at least use in the traditional sense of it. And along with my job here at the Loaded Ladle, I also work at the Cold as a support worker. So I am very involved in kind of the everyday happenings in community. All right, so what is a community fridge? There's this really good quote from Vox, and it says that community fridges act as grassroots responses to a dire food security crisis. So I felt like that was kind of a good introduction as to what a community fridge is. To go more in depth, a community fridge is a mutual aid group It's usually run by just regular folks like myself, and it provides free, no barrier food services in the community. And usually fridges are not associated with nonprofits, and they try to remain independent. They offer kind of like an anonymous way to access food, which oftentimes at food banks, you have to provide ID, you have to provide a bunch of information. And also community fridges challenge the charity model within community work. And it offers a service that focuses more on solidarity within community instead of offering charity and pity. So kind of moving away from that more traditional charity model. Yeah, and another thing about community fridges is that they are open 24/7, which is something that is really beneficial for folks who have 9-to-5 jobs or who feel a lot of shame or issues with pride around accessing from a food bank. And usually food banks are open like 8 to 4, 9 to 5, so they can be really inaccessible for people who have jobs or who want to access food just a little bit more privately. And then moving into what is a mutual aid. I also do want to mention that throughout this, if people have questions, I think there's a button to raise your hand, I believe, or you can also put stuff in the chat box. I'll try to kind of keep an eye on that as we go. Yeah, so for a mutual aid, so again, Dean Spade, the person who I'm basing a lot of this information on, said that mutual aid is collective coordination to meet each other's needs, usually from an awareness that the system we have in place are not going to meet them. So mutual aid is born out of the government not providing what is necessary for its people. So yeah, mutual aids are grassroots projects that aim to provide a need that is not being met by the government or our social systems. Mutual aid often offers shelter, food, emotional support, education, and all of the needs that are often ignored by those who should be taking care of our most vulnerable. Mutual aid differs from nonprofit organizations or systems of charity because it removes the bureaucratic logistical nightmare that is present in many of these organizations that create a huge barrier for people who require these resources. Mutual aid cuts out kind of like the middleman or the middle organization and provides the direct needs to the person. Examples of this can be when folks send money kind of through social media, through PayPal, Venmo, all those kinds of things to get people funds if they require it for whatever reason. In these situations, there's no organization taking a percentage of the funds. There's no staff monitoring these funds. It is just community funds going directly to a community member. Another example of mutual aid is Halifax Mutual Aid, which built temporary shelters for folks sleeping outside. So community funds went directly to purchasing materials. Labor was offered for free, and shelters were built. Not trying to simplify the incredible efforts of Halifax Mutual Aid, but it didn't take years to kind of complete this project, which it would have if it would have been a nonprofit. And also due to mutual aids being less established as nonprofits, they're able to cut around silly rules and sometimes provide a need through illegal means. So this was kind of shown through Halifax Mutual Aid setting up these shelters in public parks, which wasn't fully legal according to our government. They were able to stay up for a very, very long time. So that's kind of what I mean about cutting corners to kind of get people needs a lot faster than they would through like official ways. Mutual aids are a testament to radical care and compassion in an individualist capitalist society. Mutual aids remind us that we can do it without them, and them I am kind of referring to the government or social systems that are unfortunately failing people all the time. And then what I have up on the slide is that according to Dean Spade, there are 3 elements to mutual aid. So this can kind of help you determine if the cause that you're kind of looking at is a mutual aid or maybe if it's a nonprofit. So a mutual aid meets survival needs and understands why folks do not have these needs met. So there's a bit more of kind of a conversation and a collaboration with folks who are accessing the resources as well. It mobilizes people and increases solidarity. So again, that kind of idea of solidarity, not charity. It is participatory, so people who are accessing may also be helping run the mutual aid. There's collective solutions, so there isn't like one boss person who makes all the decisions. And again, it rejects saviorism. And then the next slide is, so these are examples of community fridges across North America. So I don't remember exactly where some of them are, but I know that the top left corner is the Dartmouth Community Fridge, the bottom right corner is in Calgary, and then the ones in between, I think there's one of them in Victoria, one of them in Boston, in LA. So there are community fridges all around North America. They're a lot more popular in bigger cities, so that's why when I started the one in Halifax, it was a very new thing for a lot of people. But for example, in Toronto, I think they have 16. So yeah, they're really, really common. And it just shows that it's possible to get it started. So now we'll talk more about the Halifax Community Fridge. The pictures here on the slide are on the left, what the community fridge looks like today. Although today it looks a little bit more damp and cold. And then on the right is a friend of mine who was helping build the outside structure that holds the fridge and the pantry. And yeah, so the Halifax Community Fridge opened on January 5th, 2002. So it's been a little bit over a year. The planning for the fridge started in October of 2021. So it did take a couple months for us to kind of figure out how to do this. We started the fridge with some help from some social work students, and then just myself and another friend. And somehow we planned this whole thing while being full-time social work students and also working part-time jobs. So again, that's just to show that almost anybody can do this. We started the fridge due to our frustrations with the lack of action or community work in academia. And this was initially inspired by TikTok. So that's just a nice little fact. We were both pursuing social work degrees, and we were starting to question its validity in community. We were kind of realizing that we didn't know really if social work was going to be for us, and we wanted to, get more involved. We also felt some sort of responsibility to our community as white people in academia to use our privilege to act in community instead of having these endless, terrible conversations that we were having in class where we were just othering people. We were talking about the issue, but we were never really making plans on what to do about it. So that's kind of, the fridge was kind of born out of frustration for social work. I cannot stress enough how little we knew about what we were doing. We really started from nothing. I saw this TikTok and then I just watched all the TikToks about community fridges, and then we just started from there. We learned everything as we went. And the only information that we had to kind of base off of is that I managed a food bank the summer before. So I had a bit of information on kind of what was needed in the community. But I really did not know to what extent it was needed, which I learned very, very quickly. We funded the fridge through GoFundMe. We sourced the labor through friends and family. And of course, as I will mention further on, we made a lot of mistakes. The only reason that the fridge opened is due to our relentless persistence and so much passion for community care. And although recently the board has decided to take a bit of a different approach, we started out as being completely anonymous with the Halifax Community Fridge. At first, we were only 2 people, so it was a little bit scary. We felt a lot of fear from the city and from the Halifax Regional Police due to the violence in 2018 towards Halifax mutual aid shelters and the protesters. We felt that our project would be kind of similar to Halifax Mutual Aid, and we were really scared that we would be met with that kind of violence. So we wanted to kind of protect our identity. Yeah, and for a long time that worked really, really well. We also kind of wanted to reject the idea of merit. We started getting a lot of requests for media and to be in newspapers and stuff like that. And we really didn't like the idea of kind of like our faces being posted. It didn't feel comfortable, and it also just kind of felt like it went against a lot of our values. And then recently we just felt like if we stopped from being anonymous with the fridge, it might kind of encourage people to be more supportive if they could kind of attach a face to the fridge. So really the fridge is not anonymous anymore, purely just out of like desperation and need for donations. So as of right now, after a year and a month of it being opened, we have a board. So it's run by about 10 to 12 individuals, myself included. And then we also have about 20 to 30 volunteers. Only recently we had a lot more volunteers, but we kind of started asking for expectations from people and for some type of commitment. So that definitely dwindled our volunteers a lot. So now we have about 20 to 30, and we always need more, definitely, but I think we're making it work as best as we can with 20 to 30. And today the fridge, as I mentioned before, is used by so many people, so many more than we thought. When we fill the fridge from local partners or from a grocery shop, it is empty within the hour. So it doesn't even take an hour for like $300 of food to be gone. So yeah, we really need other fridges in Halifax, and the one in Dartmouth has definitely helped a lot because we had some people coming in from Dartmouth. So it's really nice to see that there was another one that opened, and we're not associated with them at all. It's just really awesome that they've kind of they support the whole community in Dartmouth, which we weren't really able to do Halifax and Dartmouth. Just gonna check the chat just really quickly. Okay, perfect. All right, so moving on. So the foundations and the values for the fridge. I'll first just explain the pictures. So again, on the left, it's myself and some friends the day that we built the fridge. And then on the right is the first day that the fridge opened, and it was so beautifully stocked. I don't think it was ever stocked like this again, but it was really nice to have it look that way on the first day. So since we started the fridge on almost zero knowledge around starting a mutual aid, we wanted to have a solid base for our values. These values have aided us in staying true to our original goal and providing barrier-free food to the community. I highly recommend having solid values when starting a mutual aid so that you can stay on a somewhat direct path. This is really the only way that we kind of kept it somewhat linear. So the foundations and the values for the fridge are that the fridge is queer founded, and it's really important to us that queer people continue to run the fridge. Right now, part of our board, it is a lot of queer people, which is really important. Racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and all the other isms are intolerable when volunteering at the fridge or donating. This isn't something that we've kind of experienced, which we've been really lucky with. I hope it's never something that we have to deal with. The fridge is inherently anti-police. We encourage folks to contact us if there's an issue at the fridge before contacting the police. I myself and some other board members have formal de-escalation training and a lot of experience in community with de-escalating heated situations. So we would much prefer for people to contact us via Instagram. And for example, I live really, really close to the fridge. And for me to kind of assess the situation and try to de-escalate before we have to call the police. It is definitely never our intention to call the police. We haven't had to do this yet, which has been really good, even if there has been like fights and tussles at the fridge a little bit. So again, from that, we're working within an abolitionist framework. So we limit all interactions with the police or the justice system when it relates to the fridge. And we will never report someone for something they do at the fridge that may be illegal. So we've had some materials that like are attached to the fridge that sometimes get taken, and we would never pursue that because it would be silly. If people are trying to access food, if they also need the wood, then they should take the wood. And then finally, we want the fridge to be as accessible as possible, and we're always open to making changes. It can definitely be difficult because it is still just a wooden structure on the side of the street, but we are at ground level, and we try to ensure that things aren't placed up too high, but we're always open to making changes. Let's see where I am. Yeah, so I think I've covered most of our values and our foundation for the fridge. It's been really, really helpful. Every time we aren't sure, we have a dilemma, we just kind of go back to these values and we see if they fit or if it aligns with it, and then we can kind of move forward. And then more on this topic of solidarity, not charity. So this concept is discussed in depth in Dean Spade's book, Mutual Aid, which I've already referenced a couple times. I highly recommend this book to folks who want to work in a mutual aid or start one, or even if they just are interested in reading about it. It's a pretty short read, and I find there's a section of the book that kind of explains in depth what they are and their history, and then there's a section of the book that really explains like how to do one. So I found that to be really, really helpful. Let's see. And then, as mentioned briefly, the fridge is firm on maintaining that we are standing in solidarity with folks who are food insecure instead of offering charity and pity. We do not believe that folks who are food insecure are lesser than anybody else. In fact, I've had moments, and other board members have had moments where we've relied on the fridge for food security. And that's just the reality of what things are like in Halifax right now. We really want to eliminate this divide between folks who offer support and folks who need support. It can be also quite common in the charity model that people, I've heard this a lot working at food banks and in soup kitchens and all that kind of stuff, that people say that folks who, like street people or people who are houseless, should take whatever they can get and just be grateful. I think this narrative is incredibly harmful, and I think it's also just stupid, and it doesn't really account for the complexity of food insecurity. Folks should always have the opportunity to choose and have agency within their lives, and that should be present in their choices for food. Of course, we do our best at the fridge, and while folks have the choice of what they take from the fridge, these choices are usually very limited because there isn't much food left. But we never tell folks how much they can take or what they can take. That is fully up to them. Another thing that I appreciate about this model, which is solidarity, not charity, is that it forces us to remember that while our lives are complex, people who require food security lives are also complex, and the reasons for accessing the fridge are so different. This aids in removing the judgment or assumptions from this type of community work. So it helps to remind us that, you know, for example, someone who pulls up in a car who is accessing from the fridge, we don't know why they need to access. Their car might be required for work. So I've just heard some things about essentially if you're not desperate or you have nothing left, that you shouldn't be accessing from the fridge. And that just isn't true, and it's just not the reality of what things are like right now. So this model also removes our ability to say what is right and what is wrong for people who are attending the fridge, kind of like I already mentioned. So for an example of this and how this model kind of helps us deal with these kinds of situations is that a large comment or concern that we get from community members, we get a lot of these comments through like Instagram, is that folks are hoarding food from the fridge. So for people who are walking by or people who are accessing the fridge, this does sound like a really, really valid concern that someone could be, filling multiple bags of food. But I remember that while managing a food bank, lots of individuals would come just themselves, but they would be in support of large families of like 11 people, or elders, or neighbors, or even neighborhood children sometimes. So we really can't know what folks' stories are, so it's better to just, you can engage with them, you can ask them, or just leave them alone, honestly. If they're taking that much food, it's not going to go to waste. It's definitely going to be used for something. Yeah, I can't imagine that someone would empty a whole fridge and then throw it out immediately. They're definitely going to eat it. So yeah, that's just kind of an example of showing solidarity and not charity. So not telling people what they can and can't do with the food. So now we'll be moving more into how to start a community fridge. I'm also going to take another pause to check the chat or if there's any questions. Oh, is this from the Dartmouth fridge? Oh, that's so exciting that you guys are listening in. That's awesome. Okay, perfect. All right, so the four main components that I've kind of decided are really important for starting a community fridge. There are obviously so many more, but just kind of to get the baseline here, so I'll be talking about your intentions around starting a community fridge, the location, the funding, and kind of the labor around the fridge, so the volunteers or the board. I do want to mention that starting a community fridge should be an intentional project, and it requires lots of love, patience, and so much time, way more time than you can ever imagine. So I'm just going to get started on the intentions. So I really wanted to mention this because this is something that I was asked a lot in the beginning. I was asked by a lot of people, why are you doing this? Why are you, essentially working a full-time job to make this happen and not getting paid? A lot of people were really confused as to why I was doing this. So it's really important to kind of have a solid ground as to why you want to do this. So first of all, these are just some questions that you can ask yourself to really see if this is something that could work for you. So do you have the time or the emotional capacity to see a community fridge through? So time, of course, as I mentioned, it is relentless. It's always going to be happening. And then emotional capacity, starting a community fridge and seeing it through, and then being on a board for a community fridge can be very emotionally taxing. We get DMs from people almost every day asking when we're going to fill the fridge. They're hungry. They have nothing to eat. When you visit the fridge, you chat with people. They kind of share their life stories, which is such a pleasure to hear, but it can also just be really, really difficult. And also to kind of constantly have this thought that no matter what you do, the fridge will be empty and people will still be hungry. So those kinds of ideas are really common with being involved with the community fridge. So just making sure that before you set out to complete a project like this, that you really do feel like you would be able to, because it can definitely be really hard on the heart all the time. And then another question you can ask yourself is, why are you wanting to start a community fridge? So maybe you've noticed that there's a need in your community, or there could be so many reasons. But something I do want to mention is a lot of people asked me if I was doing this for work, if I was doing this for school. And I think it would be really important that these would not be the only reasons that you want to do it, because a community fridge is not going anywhere. It's supposed to be a temporary solution, but it isn't. So if you're doing this for work, do you think you'll be able to continue doing it once your job is finished? If you're doing it for school, do you think you'll be able to continue it once the project is done and you've gotten your grade and you've moved on? This isn't something that you can necessarily be temporarily involved with, especially if you're starting it. If you're just on a board and you're coming in and out, that's totally fine. But yeah, if you're going to see it through, I feel like you need a really good chunk of time. So that's just something to consider as well. And then finally, are you wanting individual credit or merit? So unfortunately, I do have to mention this just because I have noticed this in community, that sometimes people do things in order to have social capital, in order to have clout. They do it so that they look good. And it's really important that you don't do it for this, because you're not going to get thank yous and you're not going to get the appreciation that you're looking for. Yeah, if your intentions aren't to help the community, I don't think that you will ever feel fulfilled. Yeah, it's not necessarily the project that people are going to pat you on the back for. So yeah, I think it's just really important to know why you're wanting to do this, and make sure that you're kind of stable enough to see this through. Are there any questions about kind of the intentions? I feel like this might be something that people wouldn't be expecting from starting a community fridge, to have to do some self-reflection. I'll just wait just a little bit if anybody has any questions. It's also okay if we just wait till the end for questions too, if people want to just get all the information first. All right, so next up, so location for the fridge. So kind of the two main components would be whether it would be on private land or on public land. So the fridge currently is on private land. It's on Glitter Bean property, which is a coffee shop in Halifax off of Spring Garden. So I guess a note about the location would be, it'd be very good if it was a central location. If it was like in the suburbs or kind of like in the country or something, I don't think that you would be getting the foot traffic, and you probably just wouldn't be supporting the type of people who don't have cars and who generally live in the city. So for private land, it would be kind of outside or inside a local business. I highly recommend that it be outside. In order for a fridge to be accessible 24/7. If it's outdoors, it's a lot better. Obviously, with it being outdoors comes an array of issues. The list is endless, especially with the weather that we've been getting in Halifax this winter, where it's raining, snowing, ice, we've gotten everything. So that's just something to think about if it's going to be outside. But I really recommend trying to have it outside. It's just a lot more accessible that way. So it could also be outside a church or religious institution. I've noticed, at least in Halifax, the city is a lot more lenient with churches and what they can and can't do. So that might be a really good way to kind of get yourself in there. Inside or outside of a co-op space. So an example of this would be Radstorm on Gottingen. So a space that's already for the community. It would be really natural for there to be a fridge as well. Or also in the main location of a nonprofit. So if a nonprofit wanted to support the fridge through monetary donations or just like staff checking in on it, it could be nice to have it outside of a nonprofit where there's probably a lot of foot traffic anyways. And then for the public side, so I at least in Halifax, I wouldn't recommend having a fridge on public land. As we saw with Halifax Mutual Aid, having things on public land, especially when you don't ask for permission, is not going to end well. And it's going to be met with a lot of violence, and they're just going to throw everything away. So public land is extremely policed. And even if you do get permission, it still is very much policed. There's a lot of policies to kind of go through, which was kind of just too much when we were starting. There's so many bylaws. It's incredible, even just because the fridge is about like a couple inches near the sidewalk. So public land. It's really complicated. We were worried that because the door of the fridge opened on the sidewalk that we would have issues. So yeah, anytime you touch public grounds, it's really, really complicated. When we started, I also envisioned having the fridge outside of one of the public libraries, and getting in touch with a community engagement person at the library is probably the hardest thing. I've tried for almost a year now, for this project and for other projects as well, and it is near impossible. Yeah, so I wouldn't even try with a library unless you know someone. If you have a connection, that would probably be a great way. I added bullshit just because as I'm going through this, you can probably notice that like there's a million obstacles that you have to go through. And in my experience, it is impossible because I tried for 3 months, it didn't work. So we went with glitter bean. So I would probably recommend that you do it on private land. We also tried to have it on Dow campus because we wanted it to be accessible to students, because a lot more students than you think are food insecure. Just because they're, going to university, it doesn't mean they have $1 million. And I think Dalhousie is considered private land, but it's obviously this gigantic institution. And it was made extremely clear to us through an email that we were not supposed to see, that a fridge would never be set up on Dow campus. So, and again, unless you have a connection, maybe that could work. But yeah, so that's just something to be mindful of. Sometimes these gigantic institutions just don't want to cater to people who don't have a lot of money. And then as I mentioned with police, no matter where you are located, the police are always a risk. The police have been known to surveil the Halifax community fridge, even if it is on private property, which is extremely scary. We've heard from community members that the police will sit in front of the fridge and just like watch it for hours. I don't know why. And they will also sometimes tell people that they should or shouldn't go. So yeah, just keep in mind, whatever you do, they're always going to be watching over you. It's really, really annoying. Just keep that in mind. I think there is a message. Yeah, Ali, I agree. Yeah, Dallas is pretty tricky with allowing things. Their reasoning was that we would encourage a rat infestation on campus. Don't know how that is linked to a community fridge. But anyway, yeah, so we were, and they also gave us a reason that we couldn't have a fridge because they would have to shovel in front of the fridge and it would be complicated for like the plow. That was our reasoning, which is pretty silly. Okay, awesome. Yeah, Elizabeth. Yeah, no problem. We can definitely get to it. All right, so all of that spiel. Moving on to funding a community fridge. So in my experience and the research that I've done, and also through chatting with a lot of other community fridges, there's actually a group chat on Instagram that we are involved in, and it's all the fridges across North America. It's really, really helpful to just ask questions, and it's also just like really special that our community fridge in Halifax is chatting with a community fridge in like LA, and kind of the differences in issues and stuff. But anyway, through all of this chatting, these are kind of the 3 main ways to fund a community fridge. So you can do it through crowdfunding, and I see that I misspelled that word, so sorry about that. So crowdfunding, so through e-transfer, PayPal, or GoFundMe, that is the way that we did it. It was, in my experience, the easiest way. You can do it through fundraisers, through bake sales, book sales, yard sales. So if you feel uncomfortable asking people for money with kind of nothing to exchange, then this would be a really good option. And the third option would be with no money. So technically, a traditional community fridge does not exchange any kind of money at all. So this would be through trading items, finding free items, asking people to bring items for free, and a lot of trading. In Halifax, that is not very possible. I just don't think our community is big enough to be able to do this. It's also really hard to find materials for free. I don't think that's as common here. So yeah, I don't know if this no money route is possible in a lot of places, but I do know that there are some fridges in the US that have never involved any kind of money in any of their operations. I did want to mention that if you choose to do the money route, which I think probably most people will, you will need so much more than you think. We started our GoFundMe with $2,600, and that dwindled extremely fast. Just to give you guys kind of a rough cost breakdown. So the fridge was free. It was given to us. The construction materials building for the insulated structure was around $750, which is very on the low end, especially with the cost of wood right now. A lot of this wood was secondhand or somehow found. I didn't really ask my friend how he found all all the stuff to build, but technically it would probably be more around $1,000, especially with the cost of things right now. And then obviously his labor was free. If you do hire someone to do this, that will just skyrocket the price. It just so happened that I know someone. And then just materials that we always need for the fridge, which, depends every month, but like bread bags, cleaning supplies, garbage bags, all that kind of stuff, a shovel. And then we also got the fridge painted by a local artist, which also volunteered their time. However, the paint was probably around like $300. And then we spend about $300 every single week for the fridge, $200 for food and $100 for personal care items. So money goes extremely fast. And of course, we've had the fridge doors, like the outside doors, completely rip off in the wind. So when that needs to get fixed, obviously that's more money. And then an infinity amount of money for gas. If you have volunteers, and now myself driving around, that's obviously a cost that you should be mindful of. For a long time, when we started the fridge, I didn't have a car. So I either relied on people's generosity or we bought a wagon, one of those walking wagons. And we just carried everything on foot, which was absolutely doable. It just took a really, really long time. And when it snowed, dragging the wagon in the snow was definitely pretty tedious, but again, very doable. All right. And then community connections and sourcing the food. So this is kind of how we actually get food to the fridge. So the pictures here on the slide are all times that we've sourced food. So either from food banks or markets, that kind of stuff. Let's see in my notes here. All right, so sourcing food for the community fridge has always been and will continue to be one of our biggest issues. As I mentioned, the fridge is always empty, and we have a partner or a shop or a donation every single day at the fridge. So somehow, even though we drop fridge every single day, it is empty within the hour. I think all community fridges can relate to this issue. I don't think this issue will ever go away. but it's definitely a good challenge to try to keep up with it. So technically, a community fridge is supposed to be based off of individual donations. So just community members donating food and then other community members taking the food. This concept does not work in Halifax at all. Sometimes randomly we'll get people who just like do a shop or donate some stuff from their pantry. Unfortunately, a lot of the donations, the individual donations that we get, are food that has to be thrown away because it's half eaten or expired or just not edible. Or sometimes it's like not food, like we've gotten like dirty clothes donated, that kind of stuff. But anyway, the concept of individual donation doesn't really exist for us anyway. I know that I think a lot of fridges, that's like their only way of getting food. That just doesn't happen here. And I think that because the cost of living and the cost of food compared to the minimum wage is just so ridiculous, I just don't think that it is likely for a lot of people to be able to donate. It's also really hard to get wealthier folks on our radar and wanting to donate. We had an idea about going door to door in the wealthier neighborhoods in Halifax. We never had time to do that. But yeah, getting in touch with people who have the means to donate is also very tricky. I've noticed that people who donate are people who have used the fridge or who might need to use the fridge. So yeah, if people have any ideas as to how to get wealthier folks involved, that would be great. So this does mean that all of our food is sourced through local businesses, food banks, or grocery shopping from e-transfers that we receive from the community. Getting in touch with local businesses can be very, very challenging because they're often understaffed and super busy. I found that being really annoying and going in person ensured that they knew you were really serious about getting a donation and that you would continue to be persistent until they were generous with you. It's unfortunate how annoying and how persistent you have to be. And like I mentioned on this slide, I got a little carried away, but nagging works, guilting works. The dignity thing is obviously a joke, but truly sometimes like I was just like begging people through Instagram DM to donate food, really just using all the means that I had. And unfortunately, guilting people to donate, and not by individual people, I mean businesses and wealthy businesses. I would never do that to individual people, but guilting wealthy businesses works. If you tell them like, we need you, like you're going to make such a difference in our lives, like you're going to feed people, I think people get really like boosted and they want to do that. And the only thing that we can offer people is social media clout, which at first I really didn't think was a big deal. People want social media clout. Businesses want their names plastered in association with the community fridge and that they're helping and that they're benevolent and all these things. So if you kind of play into this concept, then it can really work in your favor. It's crazy how much social media is a huge part of the fridge. I'm actually realizing right now that I did not include the social media aspect in this workshop. I think there was just too many things that I wanted to include, and I also don't want to be talking the whole time. But yeah, I guess all I can say about social media is that it is a huge way that we get donations, that we get people interested, and also that people know about the fridge. As I mentioned, people DM us asking when the fridge will be filled, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, having an Instagram account, we have a Facebook account, we have a Twitter account. All those things are unfortunately really important. It can be really, really annoying to update to keep like going, but yeah, they're really, really important. I just want to see if I had anything else to touch on community donations. Yeah, so I just did want to mention, because we did get this kind of suggestion from so many people. We did try to get a box at the checkout of a lot of grocery stores in Halifax. I know that Parker Street and Feed Nova Scotia has a lot of these boxes. That is virtually impossible. It's like getting in touch with someone from the library, trying to figure out who is the general manager of the superstore, depending on the locations, is just like it's impossible. It's like they don't exist. So we have tried to do that, and it would be so helpful to have a box at the end at the checkout at grocery stores. I know that almost all the time when I go to the grocery store, they're always full. So that would be awesome, but unfortunately, that has not happened. Parker Street has been, so Parker Street Food Bank has been a huge partner in ensuring that we have food. So we do a pickup from them weekly. And they've been very, very generous, although they also have a really, really hard time feeding people as well. Just to kind of give you guys an idea, when I managed Parker Street 2 summers ago, we were feeding 100 people a day. And by feeding, I mean a food box that's enough for a couple days. So that's kind of just to show you the dire issue that is food insecurity in Halifax. And they have about 7,000 active clients. So that's 7,000 families who, without Parker Street, would not be fed and would go hungry. So that's kind of where the idea of the community fridge was also born, was that that can't be people's only resources. There should be many options. Yeah, and then for the rest of the ways to source food for the fridge, sorry, I was just checking something, is through monetary donations or through our Amazon wish list. We had a really big debate with the board about associating with Amazon because they can be, or they are, a really terrible organization. But since we've started our wish list, we have gotten so many donations. And I think it might be because people have the opportunity to choose what they want to donate to us, but they don't have to like put any effort into it. I think that's like the magic equation. People often don't want to just blindly give money. They want to know where their money's going, which is fair. So through our Amazon wish list, they can click on something that they think we would need, or something that they want to donate. They buy it, and then it gets delivered to one of our board members' houses, and then they bring it to the fridge. So unfortunately, associating with Amazon has made it that we've had so many more donations, and we've actually had food on days that we never would have. So that is something to consider. Yeah, sometimes you have to partner with really gross organizations in order to feed people. And at the end of the day, so many more people have been fed because we made this decision to have an Amazon wish list. Yeah, I agree, Ellie. Yeah, that was another reason too, was that sometimes if folks don't have a car and they can't like drive their donations, then doing the wish list is like a lot easier. Or we've had people who want to donate but aren't in Halifax. Maybe they're like in Sackville or Truro or somewhere else. So this is a really easy way where they get to choose what they want to donate. All right, so moving on to the final aspect of starting a community fridge, or kind of the baseline of starting a community fridge. So you have the board. The board is incredibly necessary. When myself and my friend started the fridge, we did it alone for a month. We were just the two of us running the fridge and then a couple volunteers. And within a month and a half, we were completely burnt out. There was nothing left. So it's really important that there is a good group of people who is not only passionate about the fridge, but also committed. That can be really, really hard for board and volunteers. Unfortunately, I've had the experience of people wanting to be associated with the fridge, for clout, but not wanting to actually do any kind of work. So it's really important to kind of, it's hard to tell when someone messages and wants to be involved, whether their intentions are good, but yeah, that might be something to be mindful of. Or also sometimes people volunteer thinking that they'll have a bunch of time and then they realize they're just too busy, which I've done the same thing too. So yeah, having folks that are committed is definitely super important. Right now our board is about like 10 to 12 people. And I would say that that's definitely enough people. You also don't want the board to be too big, because then you'll never come to a consensus if there's too many people. It's also hard to get like 10 to 12 people schedule aligned to meet once every 2 weeks. Yeah, that can be really, really challenging for sure. Also, the reason why we started the board too is not only we were burnt out, but we felt like we shouldn't be making all the decisions. Like, two white people should be deciding or kind of problem solving for all the issues with the fridge. So having a board ensures that there's a diversity of voices, but also a variety of ideas, which just don't always exist when there's only two brains thinking about everything. And then for volunteers, as I've mentioned a little bit before, they are essential to the fridge. So if you don't have volunteers, I personally can't see how a fridge could function. The volunteers clean, they restock, they maintain, they do all the key elements of the fridge. Right now, we have 1 to 2 volunteers that attend or visit the fridge to clean or to drop off food every single day. This also makes sure that if there were ever to be vandalism or altercations, tussles, anything like that at the fridge, then someone would be present and could alert us, and then we could kind of deal with the situation. So it's definitely really good to like keep an eye on the fridge. And also, when volunteers are going to the fridge pretty frequently every day, it also allows them to create connections with the people that we support. Sometimes it's nice to have these chats, and also when volunteers are interacting with them, they can also ask, like, what would you rather see in the fridge? Is there something that's more important to you? Do you have, a personal animal that you want us to be able to provide for? Those kinds of questions. So it makes us able to kind of alter our grocery list a bit more to the people that we are supporting. And then just some final little things to consider for the fridge. Let's see, sorry, I'm just gonna close the chat box because it's a little distracting. All right, so things to consider for the fridge. So violence associated with the fridge. So of course, people who are attending the fridge may be in very dire situations. This may be the only food that they will eat today. So there has been fights at the fridge. It's really unfortunate, and we've been lucky that these fights have kind of never gone further than just like, a couple back and forth, and then it's done. But yeah, this is probably something that will happen if you start a community fridge. Yeah, people are unfortunately very desperate, and they want the food, which is absolutely fair. And the best way to mitigate this issue, which is a lot easier said than done, but is to have enough food. Yeah, so if there's enough food to go around, people won't be fighting for it, but I feel like that might bring on different issues. So that's just something to be mindful of. And then, as I mentioned before, we've had a lot of people comment about hoarding. So this is something that we've also, through chatting with other community fridges, is also something that happens. I don't even want to really classify it as an issue because I don't see it as an issue, but it is something that happens with other fridges everywhere. I think people are supporting a lot of other people, and that just means that they need a lot of food. And that's just kind of the reality of what things are. But that can definitely, someone taking everything in the fridge can definitely result in like violence and fights and everything like that. Something else that was brought to our attention that I was very surprised by was that folks resell the fridges, the items that they find in the fridge. So this has become a very common phenomenon at the fridge. So sometimes there's like some hot ticket items at the fridge that are donated, and that can be resold for cash. Some people may see this as an issue, but I never have, and I never will. My goal has always been to fill the fridge. What people choose to do with the food or the items in the fridge is absolutely none of my business. And anyways, I would never judge someone for making money to potentially buy something that is like more important to them. For example, I've heard when I worked at the food bank that a lot of people would try to resell some of the food items or like the bottles of oil, that kind of stuff, in order to buy diapers. So really, I don't mind. I don't really know how they're reselling things. That point is kind of just like, I'm just like interested, and I think that it's like creative how they're able to kind of find these ways to survive. It's obviously really sad as well. But yeah, the Halifax with the fridge, we don't really engage with these kinds of complaints because one, there's no evidence, and even if there was evidence, it's not our business to police or surveil the fridge. It's also not our business to tell people what they should do with free food. It's given to them for free. It doesn't matter what they do with it. If they eat it, if they throw it, if they sell it, that is not my business. Another thing is that folks might like hang out at the fridge. So this is something just to keep in mind depending on like the location of your fridge. So if your fridge is kind of like on a really busy street or next to it is important to remember that people might hang out there. So I've noticed at the Halifax fridge that some people will have kind of gotten to know our schedule of drops for food, and they will kind of hang out so that they can be the first ones there. It's not an issue for us at all because we're kind of off of a main street. We're kind of tucked into a corner, but yeah, if you're in front of a business, that may not be something that the business owner would appreciate. I also find it, I don't know if it would be funny, but something that I've noticed is that sometimes when I do drops at the fridge, I like walk away a little bit, and then I noticed a bunch of people kind of coming out from all these different little holes, and they all come to the fridge so they can like have the first pick. So sometimes it kind of feels like I'm being watched, or like I wonder too, maybe if like someone is like on the lookout and then they like text each other. So yeah, I guess the community fridge has kind of created a community of people who also get support from the fridge, which I think can be really nice. And as I've mentioned, the fridge is constantly going to be empty. If you have a fridge in a super food insecure place like Halifax, no matter what you do, it will always be empty. And if you're going to start a fridge, if you're going to support a fridge, this is something that you need to know before you get started. I did not know this, so it felt kind of for a long time like Groundhog Day. No matter what we did, no matter, the money that we poured in, when we visited the fridge, it was always empty. And I think that's just like the reality of what things are like right now. So that should definitely be something that you should have in mind. Yeah, that it is an endless cycle. It will never be full. And if it's full, it won't be full for a long time. So yeah, just keep that in mind. That's definitely something that is still really, really hard. Even if I know it's going to happen, I feel like I always still get like shocked when we spend a bunch of money and then I'm like, oh, how did it get empty so fast? So yeah, just keep that in mind. And then the final thing to consider is NIMBYism, which I will touch more on the next slide, just because I thought it kind of deserved its own slide. I will also check again. There's no chats. Okay, perfectly. All right, so NIMBYism. Let's see. So NIMBYism is the societal issue to mutual aid. It truly is always going to be there, unfortunately. NIMBYism stands for not in my backyard, and then the ism is just like the phenomenon of that. It's a phenomenon where people who are usually wealthy voice concern or protest certain services for marginalized folks in their neighborhood. They often use ideas such as certain services will bring crime, it'll bring destruction, it'll devalue their neighborhood. NIMBYism is inherently racist, it's classist, and it's gross. It's also not true. Since the community fridge has been close to the Glitter Bean, which is like kind of like a mixed neighborhood, but it hasn't brought more crime. It hasn't brought in destruction or, an increase in violence or anything like that. So yeah, there's no evidence in that. It's not true, but it definitely does exist. So yeah, just be mindful of that if you're setting up in a wealthy neighborhood. The people who will try to shut you down will be the wealthy neighbors. An example of this is People's Park. So People's Park in Halifax was a park set up following the evictions on August 18th. So it was kind of a little tiny park. I can't stress how small it was, of people who just set up there. There was volunteers there all the time. So there was some kind of elements of safety. There was food brought there every day. And it got shut down. It got shut down because of the neighboring folks who blamed the residents of People's Park for a rat infestation, extra crime, all these things that were not true. And they did this instead of blaming the city for failing homeless people. So instead of trying to get the homeless people to house these folks, trying to get the city to house homeless people, they just got them evicted. So NIMBYism, it can be a huge obstacle, and you should definitely consider where you're setting up a mutual aid. Because the neighbors might just be your downfall. All right. So the topic of comfort food. So the idea of comfort food is something that has grown over the past years, like kind of an idea within myself, working in food insecurity and listening to folks who live outside or are in active poverty. I classify comfort food as food that brings joy, happiness, memories of easier times, maybe your childhood, warmth, sustenance, and usually something as easy and does not require a fully equipped kitchen. Some examples of this could be pasta, mac and cheese, pastries, sweet treats, frozen meals, pizza, prepared veggies, fruit, cookies, snacks, all that kind of stuff. All items that can be consumed quickly. They provide quick energy and some comfort and maybe like a bit of happiness while you're munching on your cookie. From chatting with lots of folks in community, these are the things that are most appreciated at the community fridge, where folks are looking for something to fill their hunger immediately. Even when I managed the food bank, folks usually preferred easier things over kind of like difficult prep items. The difficult or healthy items, as they can be classified, refer to fridge items that I've noticed are unwanted and also unwanted at the food bank that I used to manage. These items can be, but aren't limited to, squashes, kale, collard green, any greens with no dressing, rutabagas, which are really common, unfortunately, beets, vegan meat alternatives, or vegan milk alternatives, and also just radishes, because it's hard to do something with a radish. These foods are not inherently bad at all. That's not what I mean. They're just difficult to prepare, and a lot of them, you're unable to eat them raw, and they often, unfortunately, don't really spark joy for a lot of people if it's food that they've never had before or they didn't grow up with. Especially when folks have a limited kitchen or no kitchen at all. or if they have limited oils or limited spices, it's virtually impossible to prepare something like a squash. Like, you can't just eat a squash raw. You can't just eat a beet raw or crack open a pack of like vegan alternative meat and just like go at it. So it's really important to kind of recognize like folks who are accessing from the fridge, folks who are sleeping rough, do not have the same diet as you. And it's not because they don't want to, it's because it's just not practical. Another issue with a lot of foods that are donated to the fridge, or a lot of foods that are given to folks who would need food security, is that it's not culturally appropriate or even recognizable to a lot of communities. So things that you might have grown up with or that you cook for yourself may be something that someone has never even seen. The food bank that I worked at served many folks that were newcomers and not from Canada, or who had only been here for a couple weeks. So a lot of the food items that we were offering them were completely foreign to them and thus not edible. Like, you're probably not going to gravitate towards something that you've never seen before, you don't know how to prepare, and then you're just kind of expected to eat it. That's just not something that will probably happen. And it's not realistic to expect people to do that as well. I know for a fact that the fridge does serve a lot of undocumented folks, and therefore a lot of items that we may think are really awesome are just unusable. Of course, I need to include, as I mentioned on the slide, a disclaimer that I am not a medical professional. I'm not a trained dietitian. I don't have any kind of education in this. This is just from chatting with folks who are using these services. I also don't really like to classify food as good or bad, which is why I kind of like mentioned it as like in those two categories, which, you know, there might be different words, and I would be totally happy to kind of discussing different ways, because I know it can be really kind of tricky for folks with histories of eating disorders to kind of classify things as good or bad. But for the sake of time that I had to prepare this, that's just kind of the way that I've been sharing this kind of information. While this information may not be ideal or concurrent with what society deems as healthy or a good diet, this is the reality of people who are food insecure. And really, instead of trying to push my ideals and my thoughts on food, I simply just provide what people want. If they tell me they want cookies and they want granola bars, that's what I'm gonna buy. I'm not gonna try to like encourage people to eat a salad. Like, that's like stupid. Like, if you've already been stripped of like most of your basic human rights, to shelter, to food, to healthcare, to education, to everything, it's like a really weird hill to die on to try to force people to eat vegetables, when that's not going to help if they're sleeping outside in -25 anyway. You know, like, it's really not going to make a difference in like the grand scheme of things. And I do think that offering people what they want for food, and food that can possibly make like a minute of their day a little bit happier, is like the most radical way of offering community care. And that's what we've always strived to do for the community fridge. And I really urge a lot of food services to kind of adopt this mindset. And of course, if you're able to cook a warm meal, it's like a lot easier to add a lot more like nutrient dense things in order for people to kind of have this like well-rounded meal. But when people are coming at the fridge and they're walking by, grabbing something to eat and continuing on their journey, I think it's more important that people have something that they can consume right there in the moment. So that's my whole spiel. And I feel like on this topic specifically, it could be controversial, and I'm really open to this kind of discussion because, you know, a lot of people could debate that, you know, folks also deserve a very healthy meal. And I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's just really hard to encourage people to eat collard greens. Honestly, it's just like, it's not gonna happen. All right, and my final point is community care. So I kind of got carried away with what I put on the slide, but I do still think that it has a lot of meaning. So community care is love, it's kindness, it's understanding, it's patience. Community care is absolutely harm reduction. And harm reduction is housing, it's food security, it's accessible healthcare, it's free education, and it's safe supply, which we do not have enough of. And this just shows that like everything is connected. And that's really something that is really important in community care, is that like every aspect, every service that you can offer can be linked back to community care. I just had a bit more to touch on this. I just want to check my notes. So community care is a foundation for most mutual aids. It is the reason to redefine and find connection and relationships within your community. It's recognizing your privilege and redistributing your time and your efforts and your money to marginalized folks. Just one sec. Community care is also challenging the capitalist, individualist roots of our society and doing things for each other out of kindness with no need for credit, no need for money, and no need for power. Community care is radical and necessary for all mutual aids. And I would hope that it would also be necessary for all nonprofits. I think it is for most of them, but probably not all of them. And as mentioned in the little blurb on the slide that I just read out, everything is connected. And if the root of this connection is caring for your community, at least we know that your intentions are pure. At least you know that you can base it off of that and the rest will just fall into place. Small grassroots mutual aids will never change the fate of our society. They will never cure these huge issues. But if on a smaller scale we can support folks, I think that that can be hopeful and inspiring. I just wanted to touch a little bit on this anecdote. I had a conversation with some friends the other day about feeling defeated and hopeless when thinking or acting within these huge, impossible issues like climate change or the national housing crisis or even food insecurity, which I've talked so much about today. I do feel, however, that folks often lose themselves in this defeat and they forget that small scale action exists and can actually change people's lives. I worry that people see the bigger picture and realize they can't change the bigger picture and then forget their responsibility to care for others in the community. If we think on a smaller scale and remember our abilities to make small, little, meaningful changes, we can begin to regain inspiration and hope, or at least we can provide someone with a meal, a night in a hotel, or some financial security. This is really, really something that has guided me through the fridge because it's really easy to just get overwhelmed and, oh, this issue is too big, I'm just going to stop thinking about it. And I can't do anything, so what's the point? But when you remember, I actually can do something, and I'm not going to change the issue. I'm not going to cure world hunger. But if I start this little project, some people will be fed and they weren't fed before. So that's really something that's important to remember. And to simply state that the government should be doing all this and that they should be fixing these issues is absolutely futile. It's not going to happen. I won't see governmental changes, and people after me won't either. Systemic governmental changes takes decades. It takes so much time. And folks who are homeless and hungry are homeless and hungry today. They do not have decades to wait for us to change policies and change leaders and change parties. Yes, that should happen, but we should also be doing something right now. And so if the community can ease the burden of hunger, even for just today, or maybe even tomorrow as well, then I think we should feel responsible to do so. A great example of this is the community fridge. We didn't set out to cure food insecurity or end hunger in Halifax, but every day a couple people have a little extra to eat, and I really, really do think that that's something. Sorry if that got a little preachery. I just am really passionate about this topic. And so in conclusion, Let's see. This workshop allowed me to share my experience starting a fridge and all the knowledge that I have acquired over the past year with the fridge. I hope that I've given you all some inspiration to get involved in your community through mutual aids and radical grassroots groups who remove barriers for folks accessing services in community. Starting a community fridge is a huge undertaking, but it is absolutely possible and necessary because I did it. Are you ready to get started? And then just to end off, I just want to remind you all that this workshop was created for all of you. So please share your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns, and all of your questions. I'm really excited to hear from all of you and to see what you appreciated from this workshop. And thank you for sharing this space with me today.
Great, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Hi. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I am part of a working group that's interested in starting a fridge in Cole Harbour.
Okay.
And we came up with kind of a few questions, and you addressed a lot of what was already what we had looked at, but there's just a couple left that I was hoping to bring up, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one is, do you have any like advice or like where to go to for like food safety guidelines on like how to like manage donations? Like I know I've seen on social media that like both the Halifax fridge and the Dartmouth fridge have like a list of like what's accepted and like what's not accepted. Is there like literature that we should look at and to like help us make that kind of a guideline?
Yeah, so a lot of the food safety things are mainly just like for myself. I've worked in kitchens a lot in my life and like coffee shops and that kind of stuff. So I was always having to take like in Ontario, it's like WHMIS. In Nova Scotia, it's like something different. So, excuse me, a lot of this information was kind of acquired in the past, and a lot of it just stuck with me. So, for example, oh, I'm not actually sure how to do that. Sorry, Maggie. I can stop sharing. Maybe that will help. Okay, awesome. So yeah, so a lot of it is like just out of like what I remember. So like for example, a huge thing for food safety is that we don't accept any meat. And we're going to start accepting like processed prepared meat, but no raw meat. And that's just because like the opportunities for meat to get bad and for people to get really, really sick are so much higher than everything else. And then in terms of other things for food safety, like that's why we have volunteers attending every day so that they can kind of check up on things. They can check up on expiry dates. So far, the fridge has never like died. So the food has always been cold. So that is very helpful. But yeah, in terms of food safety, I think a lot of it you can learn online. I don't really have any recommendations as to where to go because a lot of it was just like knowledge that I already had. But it would definitely be a really good idea if you were starting a board to have someone who's just dedicated to food security. We had that for a really, really long time, and it was really helpful for someone to like continuously remind us, like, hey, we have to think about this if this food is safe to eat. Yeah. Another thing about food safety and a reason why we haven't thought about it too much recently is because the food is not in the fridge for like more than like 20 minutes. So if we're ever worried about like refrigeration or any of that kind of stuff, it just like leaves the fridge so quickly that we don't even have time to monitor that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I'm not sure if that answered your question. But yeah, in conclusion, a lot of the information I just knew from taking all these courses from previous jobs, but I know that a lot of it you can learn online. or we can also kind of have like a conversation outside of this. If you want, I can give you kind of like more tips. But yeah, recently it has not been on our radar because it just doesn't necessarily apply that much to us.
Okay, that like kind of aligns with kind of what I already knew a little bit, but it's helpful to kind of hear like some of the reasoning back, because like I knew that like you didn't accept meat, but then it was like processed meats. There's kind of
Yeah. So yeah, and also some of it is like like dairy, like if we go to the fridge and we touch the milk carton and it's warm, we'll throw it out. Like it kind of more simple ideas of food security instead of kind of getting into the really intense stuff.
Do you want us to like raise our hands if we want to chat? I don't know how you're monitoring the chat.
Yeah. Are you the same person that just asked that one question?
No. I just turned my camera on though, so you could see who I was. But I had a
Oh,
point based on that last question, or maybe another question like
yeah,
that.
sure.
I guess the food safety / best before date conversation is like very common at the Dartmouth fridge, and it becomes an issue really often. So we're trying to figure out what that policy is. But like to your point, whoever asked the question in the first place, it's like, yeah, the question is kind of, is there somewhere I can look to see if there's like a policy to follow here? But then that sort of brings us back to like the community fridges and how grassroots they are. And we don't really have that, like, we all kind of like know what would be safer. Well, maybe we don't, but I think a lot of us would know like what would be safe or not safe to eat. But it's like, do we get to decide that? So that's sort of a struggle we're having, but we'll decide as a committee. But it is like another question that I have about like fridges, maybe in other regions, or like, is there some kind of standard? Like, is there some kind of like community fridge organization that like sets standards, or is it too new? Like, I don't know.
I think because they're all independent, none of them are like associated with each other. So, and I know that in terms of like structure, the Halifax Community Fridge is like very, very structured in comparison to other fridges. I think a lot of the other fridges just kind of like base it off of the idea of like, we trust that people who donate will donate things that are good. And hopefully we will catch something if it's not good. And yeah, and then just kind of base off of that. And then in terms of like liability for like items that are not food safe, there is a bylaw or a policy in Nova Scotia, and it's kind of the same idea as like the Good Samaritans Act. So it's like, but it's about food donation. So, and it's mainly for food banks, but it would also apply for community fridges. So it's the idea that like you won't be held responsible if somebody else donates a food item and somebody else gets sick. So just because you're like the middleman, you're not going to be responsible. I think to what degree the person gets sick can definitely like determine whether this will be like used or not. But that's definitely something that we looked into a lot because we were really worried about liability. We of course want things to be safe and want people to feel that, we have pride in the fridge, but also we don't have a legal team and we wouldn't be able to respond legally if someone were to kind of sue us or anything like that. So far that hasn't happened, which is great. But yeah, there is that policy or bylaw that kind of supports us in that way, I guess. Yeah, Ellis, I know you mentioned you had other questions.
But also if Allie wants to talk, I want to let other people speak.
Yeah, sure. How about we let Allie go, and then afterwards we can come back and I want you to feel like you can ask as many questions as you want for sure. Allie, what was your question or comment?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. This is awesome information. I really enjoyed the workshop. I'm just wondering if you'd be open to share the spot that you were talking about where you chat with other community fridges online.
Yeah, so it's just through Instagram. So it's an Instagram group chat with all of the community fridge Instagrams. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like community fridge, like Halifax was joined, and then there's like community fridge LA, Boston, Pittsburgh, all those things. So it's you can only access it if you have a community fridge Instagram and they add you. Like, we were just like selected basically. Like, I think everybody's part of it, but yeah, we didn't know until they added us. So I wouldn't even be able to add someone because I'm not like yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you had a specific question though, we would be happy to ask it for you and then share the information directly back to you, because definitely sometimes we get such interesting responses and it can be so helpful. So yeah, I would be happy to ask whatever questions you have, and then we can like screenshot and mention that this is on behalf of somebody else and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't have any specific questions just yet, but maybe in the future. And I'll check out TikTok too.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Yeah, TikTok is great. I found it was really good inspiration for like the physical fridge, because obviously like we had to like plan and design what it was gonna look like. So I found TikTok was really helpful for that. Oh, awesome. So many community fridges. That's so exciting. Amazing. Definitely having one in Cole Harbor would be incredible. I think
I agree.
maybe
I hope it will happen. We're gonna make it happen. So yeah,
I think it would be a really interesting challenge just because you're a bit like far away, but if you have a car.
Well, that's the interesting kind of difference, is that they're like the demographic, like most people do have cars, but I think poverty looks a little bit different. I am recently connected to somebody at the Dartmouth Fridge that in response to your question, Elizabeth, I just was connected.
I feel it would also be
in response to your question, Elizabeth, I just was connected.
So
Perfect.
Oh, go ahead.
Was Elizabeth gonna?
Oh, oops. No, I just said that's great. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. It might be my computer.
That's okay.
The other question that we had from our little like working group what was, so we're like right now we're looking at trying to find a location, and one of our like folks was asking like does the private the person or the business or the church or whatever, like do they need like insurance or like anything that like covers it? Like how does it affect their property taxes and like those kinds of impacts on the like actual host of the fridge?
That is an excellent question. And unfortunately, I won't be able to respond it as in depth as I would love to. As I've mentioned, because community fridges and mutual aids are not super established, they do cut corners in ways that they just kind of happens naturally. So we're connected with the Glitter Bean, and the Glitter Bean is a co-op collaborative coffee shop. So there isn't like an owner or a boss. So it can be really, really hard to get in touch with them. And they have been very, very generous and so awesome in hosting us there. But we do not have much of a communication with them. So I don't know. I would assume that they have not done anything differently. And until an issue were to arise, I don't think that I would know if they have done anything differently. I assume that if they were to get like a food inspection, like by the city, that we would also get one because we're on their property. But that's kind of the only thing that I've thought about in being in association with them. Awesome, Kelly. Thank you for coming. Sorry. So yeah, so I'm not really sure in terms of like insurance, how they're doing things. And because we're so grateful for their generosity in hosting us, we kind of sometimes try to limit our communications because we just don't want to like rock the boat or ask questions that we won't like the response or anything like that. So this can kind of just be a testament as to like sometimes things are informal and like not like legit. It doesn't mean that they're bad. And if an issue were to arise, it would probably be pretty bad. But as of right now, we've never kind of had to deal with that. So I don't know. We definitely asked all these questions, but I think maybe they also don't know. But I would suggest asking those questions. Whether you get a response or not, I think is just depending on the business. And I don't even think that it's like a bad thing that they haven't told us. I appreciate not having that stress, and that they're kind of just bearing the burden of that. I think that's great. So yeah, I'm not sure. I also, a thought I'm just having right now is that maybe because we're outside, it's different. Maybe because we're not like inside their building. But yeah, I'm sorry. I don't have much of a response to that because that's just something that we have like avoided basically.
No worries. This has all been really helpful. So thank you. And my last question is like, I guess because you're with Glitterbean, it might not be as much of an issue, but like, have you had any issues or like, do you have any thoughts on like making electrical work outside in the winter for like a standalone building, or like those kinds of like the logistics of like trying to hook up a running fridge that doesn't get totally destroyed by the weather?
Yeah, so that's actually so funny because we've also been winging it for this too. Yeah, so we had like essentially like a contractor build everything, and the way that the fridge has survived is that the surrounding like structure of the fridge is insulated. What is it insulated with? I don't know, but it looks like the stuff that's in houses. So it's like that really thick, like fiberglassy stuff. And that is on both sides of the fridge. It's not at the, or it might be at the back as well. So that definitely helps the fridge like stay okay. We've noticed that in terms of electrical things, the freezer usually doesn't work in really, really cold temperatures because I might be wrong on this, but an electrician told us this, the coolant freezes. So then the freezer doesn't work, something like that. So that's the only thing about the fridge that doesn't work super well in the winter. And we found that even in like the crazy temperatures we've been getting here, the inside of the fridge, even when it's like minus 30 outside, does not freeze. So I think we just got lucky with like a good fridge. It's just like a secondhand household fridge, just like a really basic fridge. So yeah, and then the section that plugs into the fridge, obviously that's part of like the like insulated little building thing. And then there's just like the cord that goes, and I think the cord is attached. Yes, okay, I did actually think about this. So it's attached to a power cord that is like outside proof. I don't know. It was really, really expensive, essentially. And then that cord goes inside the building through a window to an outlet into the building. So yeah, in terms of like electrical outside, that's kind of the best. We have about like maybe like a couple feet of cord that is just like always outside. It's been buried in snow and rain, everything, and it still works. We didn't cover it with anything. It's just like a outside proof extension cord. Yeah, I would definitely also recommend, if you're doing the fridge outside, to also insulate the pantry. We only insulated the fridge, but it means that we can't have cans or glass items in the pantry in the winter because they will explode. So yeah, think about insulating your whole structure as best as you can. Obviously, I know insulation is really, really expensive, but that will help like mitigate a lot of electrical issues, especially just like keeping the fridge alive in the temperature that we've been getting. So yeah, and we've also we've gotten a lot of this information too from like an electrician on Twitter who has offered his services. So we just like direct message him on Twitter and we like tell him the issue that we're having, and then he just like answers us for free. So this is also like a great connection that you could find. We could also tell you like I'm not sure who they are, I don't like remember, but I could share this person with you, and they're really open to like answering our questions. And I think they've mentioned that they would be open to coming to the fridge if we ever had any like big electrical issues, because that's definitely something I don't want to mess with. I think that could be very, very bad. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. And thank you for this whole presentation tonight and for all the work you do. It's really, really awesome.
Awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Allie, did you still have a question?
Nope, I just forgot to lower my hand.
That's okay, no worries. Maggie, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, let me lower my hand. I have a quick question. I know we're at the end, but about messaging that you have around the fridge. Do you have the schedule of like food drop-offs posted, or is it does that kind of remain anonymous? And what kind of messaging do you have on the outside of the fridge? Like, do you have a recommended like list of foods people can drop off, or do you have any like guidelines that you think are important to have as like information that people read when they access the fridge, whether they're dropping off food or picking up food? And has that changed since you started?
So we started off by having a sign posted about like what you can donate. And then we also have it on our Instagram. And while we do have that, people still donate kind of anything. So even if you have the sign, it's important to have someone kind of checking all the time, because people might not read the sign, or they might not be able to read, or stuff like that. And then, sorry, what were the other parts of your questions?
Do you have, sorry, I asked a lot of things at the same time.
That's okay.
You mentioned earlier that, well, I know you have a schedule of like different organizations and businesses in Halifax that drop off on different days. Is that public knowledge, or is that just for the board and volunteers that know that schedule, and like people who are accessing the fridge on a regular basis that learn it?
Yeah. Okay. So people that are accessing the fridge on a regular basis, I think they learn it just from like being there. I think just from like watching us and like checking the time type of thing. The schedule is not public knowledge. There's no reason for that, honestly. I think I've just never thought of it. But the board, the volunteers all know it. And what we do is that we have, now we've started asking for commitment. So usually people have signed up to do the same shift every single week, which has like revolutionized the way that volunteers are kind of showing up. It's awesome, because before it used to be like, no commitment, do whatever you want, whenever you want. And that's awesome, but like people don't show up or they don't feel accountable to showing up. So now we have a schedule that's shared with the board and the volunteers, and it's essentially like Monday, there's this pickup, this person will be doing it at this time. And then we have like a sign up sheet for people to be able to sign up for like cleaning the fridge. So that's a little bit more like whatever. But for picking up, we found that if we're not consistent with picking up from businesses, they get very, very frustrated with us, which is like so valid. And sometimes they stop giving us stuff. So if we say we're going to be somewhere at a time, no matter what, we have to be there, because then that might mean that we lose that partnership. Like for example, we pick up from LF Bakery a lot. And I think they've kind of like started to rely on us being able to pick up this bread and kind of like get it out of their way. So they have like, we pick up from them Thursday and Sunday, but sometimes they'll like text me on Monday and they'll be like, please come pick up bread. And like, no matter what, we figure out a way to go pick up that bread. So that's kind of how we do it in terms of schedule. So we have a set schedule, and then we have kind of a more of a lenient schedule for cleaning. And then we have this like schedule for when things are picked up. We have 1 or 2 pickups every single day, which can be very challenging to get volunteers, because sometimes you need a car, or sometimes it's just like a lot of stuff to carry or very, very far away from the fridge. And then in terms of communication, we communicate on Signal. So it's like a messaging app. I'm sure you could do it on like Facebook, or like I know people have like Facebook pages where they'll just like post things. WhatsApp, like there's so many apps. We use Signal at first because again, we were like really feeling a lot of fear, and Signal is like, I don't think it's anymore, but it used to be like encrypted or whatever. So we felt a lot safer sharing information as to where we would be and what we would do. I don't think it is anymore, but yeah, just like a regular messaging app that is really easy. And also the thing about that's really nice with Signal is that we have like a group chat for the board, group chat for volunteers. And when we have like a surprise random pickup, we just post it in that group chat, and usually someone will pick it up within 5 minutes. And then that's like done deal. So yeah, it's really, really easy that way. And it takes a lot of pressure off of myself that I don't have to do all the pickups, or like I'll get a text to my phone about a pickup, and instead of just like me doing it, I'll just message in the chat and somebody else will take it. So that's also a really nice way to like delegate and share tasks instead of me just like driving around the city 15 hours a day. So yeah, Signal, I really recommend Signal. It's a really great app. It's really easy to use. It's like essentially the same thing as WhatsApp. So yeah.
Okay. Sweet. Thank you so much. That answered my question. And this was a really, really awesome workshop.
Yay, thank you. Other questions? No cans or glass explode in my pantry over the past 2 years. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. We had jars of pasta sauce, like just like make a huge mess in the fridge. Or cans. I didn't know this before the fridge, but cans can actually freeze. And if they freeze and thaw too many times, it's no longer food safe. So that's another reason why we can't have cans in the pantry when it's below 0. But that's awesome that you haven't had anything explode. It's a disgusting mess. So yeah, it's great that you hadn't had to deal with that. It's really bad. It can also be really dangerous. You open the fridge wanting food and like something projectiles at you. I'm just going up the chat box to see if there's any more questions. Oh, Melissa mentioned something about avoiding windows in the structure. That's a really, really good idea. I never even thought about windows because windows are too expensive, but that's a really good idea because if there were windows, they would just get smashed. So yeah, I wouldn't even go the window route. We just have like plain old basic wood. Yeah.
Yeah, I have
Something
mentioned the windows because it was brought up by HRM and trying to do like a pantry with them, that the window would allow UV rays to go in, and that would make the food go bad faster.
Yeah.
So it may not be visible that the food has been reduced in property, but it would have an impact on it. So that, and I found in my pantry a couple of times, maybe someone started a container of something that would be shelf stable if it was closed, but then it was an open package, so just so my pantry is on my property, so I find a frequent visit helps a lot in replenishing. I don't have your issues of having obviously it's always empty, but because it's pretty small, it's just one that I made over the pandemic. I don't have a big drop off that I do. I tend to do more kind of a meal load at a time, but throughout the day because it is very convenient location. So if you have a location that is closest to you and you can make frequent visit, it may be helpful too for folks who are considering new locations.
Yeah, that's definitely a great idea. Something that you made me think about with the windows too, to mention something again that I had not thought about before, but Halifax does get quite a few storms. So it is important that your structure that you're building around the fridge is like stormproof. And like, I know for the hurricane, we put like a board in front. So that's just like something to be mindful of in your budget, that you might have to spend extra money for your fridge to like survive hurricanes and stuff like that, if that's like common in your area. Or even like we have like a metal roof. And I know that that has like saved us when there's like huge buckets of snow, for it to not like seep through and leak and get all gross. So yeah, sometimes buying like a little bit more expensive material can be great, but also the contractor found the metal roof for free. So that's wasn't an issue for us, I guess. Just want to see if there's any more questions. Also, if anybody had any like comments or like any discussion points about like even like the comfort versus healthy food thing, I'm really open to discussion. There was a comment in the text box about the mutual aid book. I really recommend it. It's really, really awesome. And also just looking into Dean Spade as well. They're a really awesome activist. I think those are all the questions in the chat. It's really nice to see that people are wanting to start community fridges. It's really nice because we definitely can't do it all. Yeah, definitely about wheelchair accessibility. We've tried to think, yeah, definitely if it's like soft ground, we're like on the sidewalk. We've thought about leaving like one of those like grabber things for when things are high up on a shelf. But that would just get taken instantly. So that's the only reason why we don't have that. We're kind of trying to figure out a way that we can like attach it to the fridge. But everything that we've left in the fridge, like that should stay there, doesn't stay. So yeah, I guess us being on solid ground is probably very, very helpful. Oh, awesome, Allie. I'm very excited to talk about the working with Dal. It's really bad, but I think it'll be a good challenge. And hopefully you succeed in ways that we gave up. We couldn't do it. Dal also, another thing I want to mention, Dal refused to have it outside for the snow removal non-issue. And that was something that I think kind of turned us away from it. So Allie, we will definitely be working on this together, but definitely keeping in mind that it should definitely be outside, because if it's inside, like especially in like a university building, like I don't know. If I was looking for free food, I don't think I would go inside like the Mona Campbell sustainability building, you know? I don't think I'd feel like really comfy with that. So yeah, just getting you ready for the the fight we're about to have. Is there any other questions or comments? A lot of information or updates with the fridge are through the Community Fridge Instagram. It's at Community Fridge HFX, I believe. Yeah, and if you wanted to get in touch with me specifically, you can definitely do that through the DM, and then I can like share my email and everything. Yeah, I would be down to have further conversations. Awesome. Yes. See you at the next workshops. It's awesome. Amazing. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Rina.
Thank you.
Bye.